Edinburgh Castle. Of all Scotland's castles, Edinburgh is perhaps the best known and arguably the most haunted. Unlike most castles, Edinburgh sits square in the centre of the capital city, an impressive collection of buildings and fortifications with a history that stretches back hundreds of years and includes battles, sieges, murders, and one of the most romantic small chapels anywhere. Again, unlike most castles, it is still used, with a military garrison and a collection of fascinating museums. It's difficult to miss Edinburgh Castle as it glowers down on the shoppers of Princes Street like a guardian gargoyle, but to see it properly, it must be visited. A summer's day is fine when the views extend to Fife and the Pentland Hills, and all of Edinburgh is spread out like a well-planned tapestry. But come in autumn or winter, when an east coast har hazes the grey battlements and there are fewer friendly tourists to soften the atmosphere, you might feel differently. Then the old ghosts could grumble from their graves and the atmosphere can be grim. The castle sits on the plug of an extinct volcano, which means that 400 feet high cliffs protect it on three sides, with a steep slope on the east side that leads to an entrance that was defended by a massive moat, gatehouse and rough stone walls. Even today soldiers stand guard, watching through expressionless eyes as they wield bayoneted rifles. Their ancestors repelled attacks by English and Jacobites. Although there has been some sort of building here for thousands of years, the oldest remaining architecture extends a mere 900. Queen Margaret's Chapel was built for Margaret, King Malcolm's saintly wife, in the early 12th century. Nearby is Crown Square, where the honours of Scotland sit beside what may be the genuine Stone of Destiny, in a 15th century tower hard by the 1511 Great Hall of James IV. There is also the Half Moon Battery, built after the long siege of the 1560s and 70s, but there is as much below, where dungeons held state prisoners and Napoleonic prisoners of war huddled in the vaults, dreaming of the sunshine of France while they shivered in Edinburgh's dank gloom. In spite of all these historic treasures, arguably the most atmospheric building is from the 20th century. The Scottish National War Memorial was built after the First World War to honour the 150,000 or so Scots who died in that conflict. The sheer volume of dead shows the depth of sacrifice that Scotland made, but if the maimed, wounded and gassed are added, the real horror of that war can be guessed at. Perhaps this building is where the real ghosts are, locked inside the memory of the names in each book of remembrance. However, Edinburgh Castle has enough traditional ghosts to satisfy the most eager spirit hunter. Some are well documented, others recalled more by legends and tales. One of the latter is fairly common throughout Scotland, and concerns the ghostly piper whose notes can still be heard. It was said that Edinburgh Castle has a number of underground tunnels that slope down from the castle, extending under the Royal Mile that eventually reaches Holyrood Palace. At some time in the past, the governor of the castle decided to see exactly how far these tunnels could be explored, so he sent down a piper, ordering him to play his pipes so that his progress could be traced. For a while, everything proceeded according to plan. The piper marched along quite happily, with the people above ground tracing his progress easily enough until he reached halfway down the Royal Mile, the street that extends from the castle to the Palace of Holyrood House, when the sound of the pipes abruptly ended. Naturally concerned, the governor sent down a search party, but there was no trace of the piper, and nothing has been seen of him since. He simply vanished. But occasionally, if the wind is right, the sound of his pipes can still be heard beneath the Royal Mile, and in certain parts of the castle, as he desperately searches for escape from the hidden labyrinth of tunnels. Apparently there's also a piper on the battlements, although he may be simply a variation of the same story. Augmenting the piper is a ghostly drummer, whose beats sound a warning of impending attack. It is said that the drummer was first heard in the 17th century, when he played the Scots March, used by the Scottish mercenaries of the 30 Years' War, followed by a medley of different marches. Each march was said to belong to a different nationality, and heralded the great civil wars of the 1640s and 1650s, when all four nations of the British Isles were torn apart by horrific war. It is also reported that the drummer was a headless boy who appeared just before the 1650 attack on the castle. Today, the drums are seldom heard, which is a good thing, as they are meant to presage an attack on the castle. The last sounding of the drums was in 1960, and as there was no attack on the castle, perhaps the drummer was bidding a final farewell. One of the highlights of any visit to the castle is a descent into the dungeons, of which Edinburgh has an impressive collection. Some visitors have seen coloured orbs down in these places, where once people were held in desperate circumstances. In 2001, Dr. Richard Wiseman held experiments in the paranormal in the castle dungeons, and many visitors who had no knowledge of the castle history claimed to have experienced strange feelings in those areas notorious for ghosts. Dr. Wiseman, however, was not so sure. He thinks such feelings may have other, more natural explanations. The vaults held hundreds of French prisoners of war during the 18th and early 19th century wars with France, and it may be one of these men who tried to escape by slipping into the barrow that carried away the human excrement. Hygiene facilities were extremely poor before Victorian improvements. It is said that the prisoner was still in the barrow when the contents were taken to the battlements and emptied down the castle rock, so he died an unpleasant death. His ghost is said to stalk the castle walls, attempting to push visitors over the edge, but an overpowering smell gives warning of his presence. An earlier ghost has associations with Lady Janet Douglas of Glamis, who was imprisoned in the 16th century and accused of witchcraft. At the time, people believed in witchcraft, although the major witch craze had not yet come to Scotland from Europe. What made Lady Janet's crime so special was the accusation that she had planned to kill King James V. To obtain information, her servants were tortured, and when they broke, she was condemned to death and burned on the Esplanade, where today's military tattoo performs its annual ritual. On the 17th of July 1537, Lady Janet's son Gillespie was dragged out and made to watch his mother being tied to the stake, strangled and burned. And although it's said to be Lady Janet's ghost that wanders the castle, perhaps her son is also there after such a traumatic event. Sometimes the sound of hammering is also heard, as ghostly workmen build the platform on which Lady Janet was executed. Among the castle's other ghosts, there's a phantom dog that haunts a small cemetery where the pets of the garrison lie buried. All in all, this magnificent tourist attraction has a great variety of other hidden visitors. The end. Don't forget to like and subscribe and press the wee bell notification. And a huge big thank you to all my subscribers and patrons. See you next week. Bye bye.